So I just want to start. I will say honestly, I don't know anybody who I think is as philosophically committed to teaching, in quote, capital T, teaching, as you. And I'm just first admiring that, but also where did that come from? What inspired you in that?
There's so many amazing individuals like yourself uh, that have been phenomenal teachers and faculty, and I don't words don't express how I feel about this, but where this came from was number one, great mentors like the late Fred Brightbill, yourself, others that were incredibly dedicated and excited about passing knowledge forward to the next generation with no strings attached. And Jim Allen was a big part of that. You know, Jim was always in clinic. He was always there. I remember when I made a mistake on a refraction in my first year, he said, Andy, this is like putting tractor tires on a Volkswagen. Okay. And I'll never forget that. So there have been, I would say a huge part have been my previous mentors. There were things that you told me, and there were things that Bright Bill told me that I still remember to this day that were huge in my training. And I think all of us as faculty, that is the gift that we're in the heads of every one of our trainees for
Forever.
forever. The other part of it was in my second year at the VA. uh, I wasn't signing up any cataracts because I couldn't look at that patient and with a clear conscience, uh, I would have guilt because I'm a rookie and this is your vision, and I had an ethical conflict within myself. And finally, Hugo Higa, my senior, said, Andy, you got to do something here, man. I mean, we're dying. So, you know, he convinced me to start signing patients up, that it'll be safe and whatnot. And so when I started, uh, I decided that if I was going to be able to stay at University of Wisconsin and in this position, that we would have to come up with uh, a way of training residents that was as safe or better than any other program in the country. Steve Sauer, Dan Canuck, myself, all worked together, and we came up with a very unique way of training residents that, looking at 9 years of data, uh, every every case uh, taken into account, uh, we had a little over 1% complication rate, which was better than any reported resident complication rate in the country. So we did it, and that allowed that was a big driver of of our passion. I came from a modest family. You know, my dad was a struggling architect. When I needed things, he'd always joke and say, I'll draw you a pair. If you need a new, I'll draw you a pair. I'll draw this, I'll draw that. But I I uh I was not tempted by the economic stresses on a lot of surgeons these days. And I think that allowed me to be very, very happy and to give my all at the teaching mission at the VA to maximize outcomes, you know, for the patients. And that was a beautiful thing.
How did your residency prepare you for your career? Maybe you don't have anything to add to what you just said, but I'll
Well,
throw
I'll
that
tell
out.
you, I'll tell you, Jim Allen, because and let me tell you, Bert, when I started my career, and I was just scared to death because, you know. I was a senior and now I'm training residents.
Yeah.
I know some of my junior residents had some concern about how's Andy going to be able to train? He's right out of the chute. He's taking
Yeah.
over for the great Jim Allen. That pressure was on me. But I will tell you, that bugger, I 6 months of doing cataract surgery with residents, I finally went to Jim Allen and I said, Jim, I can't get one of our patients that I'm doing to dilate. I don't know what it is. Will you help me here? These are difficult cases. And he smiled and he said, Andy, I've been saving cases for you. So Jim had a repertoire of pseudo-X, small pupil, all of these difficult cases, and he just saved them up for me. And he smiled and said, I felt you were ready and it was good for you. I think once you get through that first phase, you realize how well you have been trained because you have good outcomes and things come out the way you expect them to. And that's when it's sort of like parenting. When you're parenting a child, they don't really realize it until maybe later. And especially when they're parenting a child, they look back and they say, oh my God, how lucky I was. And that's sort of the way I feel, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Madison. What are your best memories about Madison? You spent your whole
Oh,
career, so
I I tell you, my very best memories of Madison are the people. People in the Midwest are the most gracious individuals, having strong connections to many, many departments. I would hear these horror stories about, how our faculty, how other faculty interact. And I tell you, I think our faculty, Bert, was just an extension of the 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 Midwestern people and their humility and graciousness. Our faculty, I think, unilaterally always did the right thing for our residents, uh, and it wasn't financially driven. And I've always respected that, and that has always given me great pleasure, in raising, Lauren and my family there and being part of that culture.
is there anything you now wish you had known but didn't know when you embarked on your career?
Across the street, there was a family practice doc when I was in med school, and he pulled me aside and said, Andy, let me tell you, the one piece of advice I'll give you is live among the people. Be humble, live among the people,
Hmm.
because as the face and the economics of medicine changes, you will never be compromised. Because if you live among the people, it'll all work out for you. I feel like I was very, very well prepared, in that venue.
This may be a hard one for you, knowing you, but what would you consider your most significant accomplishment?
That one's easy. And I think it's our surgical complication rate because I was able to, with the help of the team, uh, come up with one of the biggest challenges that that we have ethically, training a new generation. And Bert, that was never, I'm sure as a surgical trainer, uh, you know, that was fascinating to me. I had the residents teach me, uh, to be a better teacher. Uh, I've got a resident I can't get through, and to them, and they're plateauing, and how do I get them past that level? And sitting down with the residents, talking with the residents, trying different approaches. And actually, one thing that came to mind um, was a resident that had plateaued. We switched roles. I'm going to be the student when you start operating, and you're going to tell me
Mm.
as faculty what you're doing, and turned him around instantly. Rather than him
Really?
being nervous
Okay.
and blocking, he was in the driver's seat. So it forced him to think ahead, and it instantly, he took off like crazy in a matter of 2 weeks.
Any words of advice for current residents wanting to follow a career path
You
like?
know, I think that I would pass on, um, my what was told to me about living among the people. I think that's a very important message. And I think the other thing is, and I've said this before, is that a very important principle in life is knowing what you don't know. You have to be self-aware in order to change. And if you change, you've attained the ability to continuously evolve. And that is an amazing thing. But teaching was never a boring thing to me, because number one, if you open your mind, every resident will teach you something. Number two is that microsurgery, ocular surgery, is dimensional, and every resident isn't unique in the 5 or 6 different dimensions that it takes to become an amazing surgeon. So your techniques have to take into account that everybody is not the same. They're all individuals. They all have different ways of learning. They all have different ways of communicating, and you know, and let alone the different physical and psychomotor aspects of surgery. So I, anyway, so
Well, maybe you've answered this one, but I'll throw it out again. What does this award mean to you?
I really feel that this is more um, credit that should be given to our village, to DOVS, uh, uh, to each faculty member, and not only their personal sacrifices, but the sacrifices of their family. And if there uh, things that I overlooked, Berta was my family. And I remember one graduation where I was the keynote speaker. I chose to talk about the spouses and the family
Mm.
of all the residents, because I mean, what it was like training
Sure.
there was the system putting all these pressures on you, and you were feeling it, and your significant other, your spouse was struggling at home, and you know but I realized that there's an enormous commitment by your family that is unrecognized, Bert. It means a lot, but I wish somehow this could be uh,
Spread
spread
around.
among
Yeah.
everybody in my life,
Yeah.
including my family. So, but it is a unbelievable honor,
That's
Bert, and I really think it's a testament to our department, our process, our faculty. Uh, I feel, quote, I've always felt they've done the right thing.
that's great. Why don't we just close with anything you want to say about your family living in Colorado and how
Yeah,
the transition's been? And
it's as I've mentioned, this new adventure I'm on has been incredibly challenging. The farm I've got a lot to learn, and I initially thought, I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but we lost thousands, tens of thousands of pounds of apples one year to a pest, and I I remember prior to that thinking, well, I can figure out this spray schedule. I know how to grow fruit. Criminy, I'm an ophthalmologist, you know. And then after losing that crop, I found one of the oldest farmers I could. And they turned the crop around in a year or so. It's been incredibly humbling, and I guess like many of us, Bert, we're all constitutive learners,
Yeah.
and this has been a big shift for me. And I think as you approach, our last phase of our life, that it's good to nucleate something, whatever that is, because so many of us have a hard time transitioning.
Okay, sir. Thank
How'd
you.
I do, Bert?
Oh, you bet. We'll have the
No,
residents grade it.